The whole day was full of celebration because Rajani was preparing to entertain guests. And we had international visitors working on human rights. And she had got a huge feast done. And I was really surprised to see so much food, you know, to be eaten at once. And also, Rajani was very lively and bright that afternoon. It was a very happy occasion. Looking back, I feel that it was like the Last Supper. After the meal, Rajani had to go back to the medical faculty.
I can remember waiting for her to come back. I had a big test the next day and I hadn't done any work for it, so I was just wasting time. And then I thought I'll start at 6 o'clock, and I was playing with my sister. Then I sat down and thought I'll have a cup of tea. And I'll wait for the clock to get to 6 exactly, and then I'll start working. And that's why I can remember hearing the shots. So I knew exactly what time they happened. And I can remember someone saying, I wonder who they're shooting now.
For the first time since Rajani's murder, her sisters and daughter are together in Sri Lanka. They are reunited in Colombo, far from the family home in Jaffna.
I looked over Jordan and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home.
It was like a thunderbolt.
It became so dangerous for us to live there. And I can remember when you wanted to come for the funeral, Amma and Appa thought that, you were crazy, because they were quite certain that if you even tried to, if you came for the funeral and even if we kept it quiet, you would be killed. And we didn't want to take a chance.
Of course, I've cried for her and I continue to mourn for her, but the fact that I cannot return to Jaffna makes me feel as if, it feels as if, Rajani is still there in Jaffna.
Rajani's life begins in Jaffna with her older sister, Nirmala. One sister's story cannot be told without the other.
When my sister was killed and I was crying about it, the uppermost thoughts were of our childhood together. Those images kept coming back and I kept saying, my sister, my sister. As little girls, we were so very close. All the members of the extended family used to remark how we never fought.
The church was there, they were fully involved. They were in every choir, in every group.
They had talents over the others. They could sing very well. And even when they sing, their faces had expressions.
As young girls, one figure who was always close to us emotionally, it was a woman who used to come and pound rice. She would come and tell my mother her tales of war, trials and tribulations, and we would just sit there and listen to all those stories. It was customary for such people not to be given tea in our cups because they were lower caste. As we grew older, we started arguing with our mother. I still remember a cup she had reserved for the pounding woman with the handle chipped. And then later on it improved to a much better cup. I think because of our middle class Christian background also, there were all these notions of charitable living, love thy neighbor as thyself. And then these were complemented by the books we read. For instance, reading Little Women. And Rajani and I would fight over who wanted to be Joe. Both of us, we wanted to start a house for orphaned children.
Nirmala got a scholarship because she was first in the island in the ATCL teacher's exam. So she went to America. That's how her life changed. There was never a Sunday where she wouldn't sing a solo in church. But when she came from America, she said, there's no God.
Nirmala's arrival at a women's college in America coincides with the student protest movement against the Vietnam War.
I became very politicized about the role of the West. You start, and then of course this brings you back to your own background. Rajani and I were born 5-6 years after we won independence. So the colonial rulers had left completely, but the colonial legacy was still there, very, very strong.
The colours which are being proudly carried are the King's colour.
And it was so present in my own persona. Because when I went to the United States, my American counterparts looked at me as a curiosity. I had saris, but I spoke English very well. Where did you learn to speak English like this? Then they were shocked because they had never read Pride and Prejudice or, the complete works of George Bernard Shaw, and I had. So I started thinking, what had happened to me? I had learned so many European things that I knew not as much about my own background. I started thinking, why is this society so rich and why is Sri Lanka so poor? So I started considering my own position as a colonized person.
Till they were young, extremely within the line. On that line I drew, they never crossed. But after they left school, they had their own views, their way of thinking, their way of acting. They would sort of quarrel or try to direct me, and so on.
When I came back, my parents were very, very upset because they just did not know how to handle this young woman who was so different. Rajani was absolutely delighted, and so was I, because what was so interesting was I opted towards left politics. I had read Marx and Engels and Mao, and unbeknownst to me, Rajani had gone the same route.
Rajani is an unusual figure in medical school, a woman, a Tamil, and a left-wing political activist. She is already a leader in the student Christian movement. Between classes, Rajani urges students of all faiths to fight for social justice.
I was 23, Rajani was 22. We were going to be working for the people. I remember going to my father's area in Jaffna, looking for land and whether we should start collective farms there. And my mother was completely upset by this because she was thinking, here I have these daughters of marriageable age and I've got to get them married eventually, and they're refusing to dress well and wear jewelry and show themselves off in society. We wanted to marry men who shared our political idea, a revolutionary or a left activist. And we did meet such men.
Nirmala marries a radical Tamil intellectual. Together they teach politics and dream of revolution. And Rajani falls in love with an impoverished student activist.
As soon as you walk in, they kind of slam the door behind you. And then you walk to the next section and they slam the next door behind you. It gives you this shudder, you know, it's this feeling.
Rajani's husband, Dayapala, had been a student leader. He spent 5 years of his youth in jail as a political prisoner.
For me, it was weird because I come here as a free man today. But still, the conditions in this prison is the same as before when I was in for 5 years here. So not a single day in my life I did not think about this life here.
In 1971, Dayapala was arrested, tortured, and put in solitary confinement. He was part of an armed revolt of peasants, unemployed youth, and university students. By the end of the anti-government insurrection, 25,000 youth were dead.
How did you want to change society then?
Yeah, changing society for us, eradicating poverty. Right? We were so poor, and we come from rural background. We were part of the rural poor. 71 insurrection was basically, come from the rural poverty. That is the origin of the insurrection. And we were jobless, no work to do. And then sometimes people thought dying is much better than for not having work. As a young boy, I had to walk to school about 14 miles. I never owned a pair of shoes until I went to the university. And at one point, I remember, I stopped going to school for a year. That was because I didn't have a shirt to wear. In the 60s, I can remember as a 13-year-old child, I attended the first Communist Party conference. We started talking about China, Cuba, and the Soviet Union. All these countries gave us very good examples of people's ability to change society. Well, when I met Rajani, we talk about politics for days and nights. I found her extremely beautiful and we were very much in love. But I never wanted to have a permanent, committed relationship. We talked about all these revolutions we knew about and the world leaders. And I also talked about Che Guevara, how he left one day for Bolivia. And I said, same thing would happen with you, and I would leave because there are other people who needed us more than my wife or children. I think Rajani was very idealistic about the revolution. I remember her saying that, yeah, you are my Che Guevara.
Youth unemployment tears Sri Lanka apart, but so does ethnic strife. Tensions and frustrations among the majority Sinhalese are directed against the minority Tamils. Angry mob violence erupts.
There are lots of complicated reasons as to why these ethnic identities became very reinforced. Colonial rulers had their own objectives, and inevitably ethnic groups were pitted against each other. Once independence came and one man, one vote was introduced, all these sort of simmering communal antipathies began to sort of come out in the open and play out in a very stark fashion. The Sinhalese said, the Tamils have always been privileged because they were well looked after by the British. We were the ones who suffered, and these Tamils should be kept in their place. Language rights were taken away. State-planned colonization schemes were set up where in Tamil areas, lands were taken away for Sinhala settlers. And this land was a sacred land meant for only Sinhala Buddhists. And all others might as well get out of the country.
Still, Rajani, who is Tamil, and Dayapala, who is Sinhalese, decide to marry across the ethnic and language divide.
To Raj's parents, even the sight of me was annoying. My parents were really upset about my relationship with the Tamil woman, especially because Tamils were considered in my village as some alien people.
My mother is not a nationalist at all. She wouldn't have minded so much if it had been a Sinhala person. But they would have wanted a Christian Sinhala person of a similar social background, you know, somebody who read Jane Austen. And my brother-in-law was nothing like that.
A baby daughter is soon born to Rajani and Dayapala.
It was a real positive experience for me. But still, I was coming to terms with my idea of leaving the family one day for politics. And even though I was so sad, but I thought that that was my ultimate aim.
Rajani, now a doctor, is posted to an impoverished rural hospital far from her family and daughter. She gives herself unconditionally to her patients. A second child is on the way, but Dayapala has little choice but to leave Jaffna. Ethnic conflict is on the rise, and there are few opportunities for a Sinhalese lecturer in Tamil Jaffna. From now on, long separations will color their marriage. And so begins a series of letters from Rajani to Dayapala.
Dear Dayapala, I am with you. Let all the world be against you. I will be with you. Because my love for you is not in happy times. My love for you is not something that intellectually and politically says yes, yes. It is something that I have chosen to have. A relationship I chose to build and nurture.
After a year and a half away, Rajani returns to Jaffna. She will teach anatomy at the medical school. She learns that Nirmala has developed close ties with Tamil liberation groups, forming secretly. Tamil militants are rising up in anger over continuing government attacks on their rights and institutions.
Tamil militants had started doing, little operations here and there, a little bank robbery here, a little attack on a police station. They were very isolated and sparse at the time. There was a kind of a unsaid excitement bubbling underneath because people were like, oh my God, our boys are doing this. Because the state was always seen to be an invincible state. I think, we had always talked about the armed revolution, and here it was at our doorstep. When the LTT came, they came with a very practical task. They were doers, basically. And I think I was completely mesmerized by that. Also, I was sort of humbled by the dedication of these young men. They were so sincere, they were so committed, they were completely unschooled in politics. They hadn't read any fancy book on political theory, but their dedication came through very clearly. Very few people supported them. It was very, very dangerous. You had to be completely clandestine. One day they came and said, we need your help. One of our members has got injured. I went to Rajani and I explained this to her. She was very dubious about her getting involved because she hadn't sufficiently addressed her mind to supporting Tamil nationalism. She hadn't become comfortable with the idea as I had. She just hesitated a few minutes. She thought about it and she came. And she came and she helped us, and she helped us again and again and again.
I told them that they must not join an armed group because I knew Tamil Tigers did not allow their members to leave the organization because of their secretiveness of the organization. If they left, Tigers would kill them.
Nirmala's arrest was a real shock. The marriages were nothing because, we were an ordinary family and we had, for us to even have the police or anybody come to our house was like unheard of.
I was interrogated in an army camp full of soldiers in the barracks for 1 month and 10 days.
I think she was probably the first woman political prisoner to be taken in the north. We were really scared as to what was going to happen because you hear horror stories about how prisoners are tortured.
I was charged with harboring unidentified persons supposedly connected to terrorism and also withholding information. It was kind of modeled on the British PTA but was much more draconian. You could keep somebody in incommunicado detention for 3 months without access to a lawyer. And then that could be indefinitely renewed for up to, not indefinitely, up to 18 months. I was in solitary confinement throughout the period I was here. There was a 24-hour guard for me especially, who was seated outside day and night and who accompanied me even to my toilet.
Go ahead. Telling in there.
Clashes between the Sri Lankan army and Tamil militants in Jaffna escalate into greater violence. In 1983, news of fallen Sinhalese soldiers sets off an anti-Tamil rampage in Colombo. Mobs of enraged Sinhalese men and women beat, cut, and murdered thousands of innocent Tamils. Tamil neighborhoods are burnt to the ground. The Sri Lankan government, guilty of collusion, is unwilling to stop the violence.
Rajani and I were in our front garden. There was nothing to do because there was curfew. And suddenly we heard this announcement that 35 prisoners had been killed. Sinhala prisoners had massacred Tamil prisoners. And Rajani and I just looked at each other and we had no words because we thought, okay, Nirmala was killed. We read out all the names. We were waiting till the 35th name was mentioned, and a sigh of relief, even though we were really sad for all those who had died.
There were Tamils, lots of Tamils who were killed by the Sinhalese prisoners, and prison authorities almost looked at these killings passively, and they did not take any action to stop these killings. And I was greatly affected by that. I thought Nirmala had been killed at that time. But still, politically, I wasn't with them. I had this great relationship with Nirmala and Rajani. I didn't want either Rajani or Nirmala or any family members to suffer just because they were Tamils.
Despite all the injustices suffered by the Tamils, Dayapala cannot support the Tigers nor their desire for an exclusive Tamil state. To move forward, Tamils and Sinhalese must build the armed revolution together. Since Nirmala's arrest, Rajani is viewed suspiciously by the Sri Lankan security forces. She decides to leave the country on a Commonwealth scholarship to Britain. Her 2 daughters will stay with the family in Jaffna. Rajani has more on her mind than graduate studies. She is preparing a huge international campaign for the release of her sister.
This campaign Rajani started single-handedly, and she never looked back. And I know that she had a great love for her sister, and that love inspired her to commit herself to the campaign.
Nirmala, a young Tamil revolutionary woman, a militant feminist who struggled against all forms of exploitation and oppression, is today incarcerated in a solitary prison cell. Can walls imprison her spirit of freedom? Can they extinguish the fire of defiance she kindled in the minds of her people?
I had by then become a celebrated prisoner. Outside, there was constant talk about me. And there was also this international campaign going on, which Rajani was involved in spearheading in from London. I may have stayed in prison nearly 22 months, and then I got a message from the Tigers. They smuggled a message in saying, "Are you ready to be taken out?" And of course I was very keen, and I said, yes, anytime, any day. It was such a risky thing to do. I was sort of like whisked away out of the prison. I was immediately given a cyanide capsule, which every Tiger member wears around their neck. If they are ever apprehended, they bite the cyanide capsule and they commit suicide. And when they gave me this, and I asked them what this was, they said, well, if the army catches you and us again, you don't want to get caught, do you? And I kind of, I took a step back because I felt very strange, because I felt that I was escaping to live and not to die.
Nirmala and her liberators escape to India. The Tiger leadership is thrilled. News of Nirmala's jailbreak has made headlines all over Sri Lanka as well as India.
As soon as I arrived in Madras, my husband had told me things are not like what we thought they would be. He had already had major rows in the movement about the value of holding political classes for the cadres. They were all brought to India for military training. The young cadres had this distance and gap between each other, even though they were going to go to the battlefront tomorrow and were going to die. What my husband and some others insisted on was that these cadres should be given some kind of political education about why they were involved in this struggle. Now, the Tiger leader was completely against this. I felt we couldn't question any of the military leadership. We were not sure what to say to people because we did not know who to trust.
Rajani, a doctoral student in London, is known as a meticulous observer, a perfectionist in dissection. For her, the study of veins and limbs in humans and primates offers indisputable knowledge. In science, as in politics, she is in pursuit of truth. Since Nirmala's arrest, Rajani has strengthened her ties with the Tamil Tigers. She becomes a leading figure in their political office in London.
Rajani, coming from a middle-class background, supporting Tigers, a young PhD student, a doctor, well-known in Japanese society, and supporting the Tiger cause in the West, in London, in Frankfurt, in The Hague, was really a turning point for Tiger movement. After some time, she had joined the Tigers. Rajani said she would not return to Sri Lanka legally, but she will come to Jaffna via India, and she will fight with other Tiger women against the Sri Lankan security forces. And she thought she would never see her children again.
Dear mother and father, it would be foolish to argue, but the history of our people has changed persons like me. If I have never fulfilled your dreams of being a good middle-class child, please forgive me. I am as much worried and more aware of the responsibility to my dearest children. But always, I have great confidence in truth and justice. If I am true to myself and my people, my children will be looked after.
In 1984, I went to see her in London. It wasn't the same person I knew. Rajani had completely changed. We were splitting up because for me, my personal life was a political life, and I couldn't touch any woman who disagreed with me politically. Rajani believed Tigers were the only force to liberate the Tamil nation.
I was with the Tigers in Madras for only 6 months. It was a hugely traumatic experience for me because I had deluded myself in the hope that we would be useful to the movement, that we would inculcate progressive values of human rights, democracy, and also, imbue the young cadres who were politically unschooled with progressive values. And of course, that couldn't happen. And we realized that this was a pure and simple military outfit with cutthroat ruthlessness operating at the center. The ordinary cadres could not have just left. Many of them left taking great risks. Some of them were apprehended and murdered. But I think they did not dare touch me because they had just months before this made such huge propaganda about saving me from prison and hailing me as someone who has come back to the fold, so to speak. And of course, then they couldn't just kill me because they knew that news of it would be all over the place.
While Nirmala is in India and Rajani in London, the Jaffna they have known and loved is being transformed.
We had large militant groups who openly started carrying arms, and people began to support either this group or that group openly. And there was also the presence of the Sri Lankan army, and they were becoming more and more ruthless in how they arrested people or tortured. I remember in school, whole classes of students just suddenly disappeared one day because they went and joined one movement or the other. We started seeing lots of conflicts between movements and within movements, where there was a lot of torture and killing within the liberation groups, and people were unwilling to criticize that because they felt that if you did so, you would be a traitor to the Tamil society. I remember Liberation Tigers went on a massacre of other movements. On one particular day, at a particular time, all the camps of another movement were just attacked, bombed, and bodies was, all over the place. I don't think even family members were free to talk about this, because if you spoke about it, then you would be the next target.
By 1986, the separatist Tigers emerged supreme by eliminating all competing groups.
Rajani had begun to have problems with the Tiger group. Some of the young men who had fled the movement, a couple of them went abroad. She met with them. And she also heard from us when we left. Initially, she was shocked. She couldn't believe her ears. But then soon afterwards, when she heard firsthand from these young men, she realized that things were going seriously wrong.
The Tiger leadership in London is furious with Rajani's questions and accusations. She is being watched. Her phone's tapped. The Tigers believe she will betray them.
Dear Dayapala, I have left the Tigers. Only my own heart will know the echoes of my cries for my children and you. Would it be that I never see you? Would you believe that most of the days and nights I think of you? We have been learning our lessons from the concrete conditions and the reality. We know how a revolutionary has to patiently charter the course of the movement, guiding and building, rather than destroying and splintering. Our paths are drawn in different nations, but our goal is the same, Rajani.
Soon after, I had to go underground because security forces were after me.
By 1985, Jayapala is seen as too great a threat to the Sri Lankan government. His efforts to organize both Sinhalese and Tamils into an anti-government resistance movement have not gone unnoticed.
I decided to send my children to London to be with Rajani. And she wrote to me saying that her bond with the children is still strong. She was very distressed about what she thought earlier, that she would not see the children again.
I went to the UK because Rajani was there. I was happy to see her, but we were both so deflated and defeated. We had both gone through the same route and we had been betrayed by the movement that we entrusted our lives to.
Rajani's break with the Tigers will not dissuade her from playing a role in the life of her people. A day after she defends her doctoral thesis in London, she boards a plane for Sri Lanka. This is at a time when most Tamil professionals are fleeing their burning country. Nirmala's return to Jaffna would mean incarceration again, or even death. Recently divorced, she remains alone in London, in exile.
I even begged her to leave the children with me. She said, no, because I was in limbo in the UK. I hadn't established myself. So she said, no, I will take my children back. They'll be fine. Her words were, there are millions of thousands, hundreds of thousands of children living in Jaffna, facing the same bombing and shelling. My children have to go back with me and live the same life. I don't think that she would have been satisfied, as we advised her that she should leave Jaffna, go to Colombo or go abroad. She would have been satisfied living like that.
Yeah, she never wanted to go abroad.
Yeah.
You know, that is why she came back to Jaffna.
I know.
To work for her people. That's what she called her people, always.
Yeah.
You know, she has this phrase saying, my people.
Yeah.
So she came back to Jaffna to serve the community.
Yeah.
And she did it very well.
Yeah. I mean, we have lived kind of, somewhat embittered lives in exile.
Yeah.
Because we have not been able to be fully participate in the politics of our country.
Yeah.
In a way, that right to be, democratically outspoken has been denied us.
Yeah.
Because after Rajani's death, we all realized.
Yeah.
But in a way, our lives have been somewhat embittered and unhappy.
Yeah.
Because a life in exile is not one of choice. But Rajani, I don't think she would have been able to cope with it at all. Rajani wanted to go back to the university, teach. She said the Department of Anatomy needs building up, and I have to do that.
I have been trying to pick up the threads that have fallen apart in work and organization and purpose. I was literally telling off everybody. Some of the old laborers said, "At last, Mother has come." They are like children. Maybe they are relieved that someone with a sense of purpose and loud voice, a tough mama, has come back to restore order. I would feel so depressed if I had not stood with my people, especially in this hour of immense suffering, that I had lied to my spirit, to the spirit of my people, to the millions of oppressed people. Maybe it looks grandiose, but that's how I would feel. That I have chosen comfort and love, the fulfillment of my own desires to that of their suffering. A trigger-happy security force, the state involved in death squad activity, neo-fascistic nationalist gangs. We are sitting on top of a volcano, an active one.
You would just sit there and listen, and every moment became such a long moment, and you'd listen to these planes, and you were just intensely listening to, and then you would see them in your mind's eye circling overhead and then swooping down, and you could hear them swooping down, and the bomb would fall, and you listen to the bomb, because it might fall on us, it might fall on somebody else, and then you would just stare at, we were sitting in the bunker, and there'd be earth walls in front of us, and you just stare. And there was a corner of the bunker that had a crack in it, and I once looked up and I saw the plane exactly in that small crack, just in a small scrap of sky. I think what was most terrifying about the war was how helpless all these people became, all the adults, the whole community, that, as a child you look up to because they are normal and safe, and the other people who protect you. They just were so afraid and so helpless that they couldn't do anything to stop the bombs coming, and they couldn't do anything to make you safe. And I think whenever I looked at my mother, I saw someone who was very self-confident, very sure, very determined and purposeful, and that she had work to do. And when you see that, you realize that even during these circumstances, even during such terrible things which you can't stop, you can still maintain your strength as a person. Death seems so normal that people died all the time. So I didn't think she would. I didn't think it could happen to her. She was very much there in my life during the 4 last years. She liked to have order in the house. And I think this increased more and more because I think everywhere else became so disordered. So the only place you could have order was around you.
These were times of war when women were the bravest of the whole of society, because the men had gone to war, or they had gone abroad, or they had died in the war. The women were keeping the homes going. They were keeping civil society running. And she was one such woman as well. Her husband was in the underground, in the south. He was no good to her. So she was exactly one of these women.
Jayapala has now been underground for 2 years, putting all his efforts into building an alternative political movement. This is a particularly dangerous time for left-wing activists like Jayapala. Thousands disappear or are murdered by ultra-nationalist groups and government killing squads.
Rajani used to bring the children to Colombo, to my safe houses, for me to see them. It was a great joy to see the children, and at the same time I knew that I would die and leave them.